Greetings, hello and welcome to our YouTube channel, The Ministry of the Real Truth. Today via this video we present you with Volume 1 New Expanded Edition from OutreachJudaism.org. Let's Get Biblical by Rabbi Tovia Singer, who poses the question, why doesn't Judaism accept the Christian Messiah? And it's in memory of Rabbi Dr. Leon Kutz. Dedication. In each epoch of Jewish history, an uncommon luminary emerges to nourish his generation with the sacred oracles treasured by our people, the Jewish people. Rabbi Dr. Leon Kutz was an extraordinary Talmudic scholar, born to one of the most aristocratic families in the world of Judaism before the Holocaust. He was the son of the Degel Reuven, Rabbi Reuven Kutz, the renowned chief rabbi of Petach Tikva. How was Rabbi Kutz able to convey the fire of Torah to American Jewry and inspire generations who are struggling against the sweeping tides of assimilation? How did this unusual, revered sage draw so many souls to the warmth and beauty of the Jewish faith, imparting the teachings of spiritual giants of the past to his countless disciples in the West? How was he able to radiate the fire of Torah to his community at his congregation at Das Israel, which he led for more than 63 years without ever compromising the eternal teachings of our nation, the Israeli nation, the Jewish nation? I watched the special fire that this saintly rabbi carried. This is Rabbi Tovia Singer stating this, that he watched the special fire that this saintly rabbi carried. Fire comes in two kinds. One is the fire that is characteristic of the altar. It is a fire that consumes the sacrifice that is laid upon it. The second is the fire of the menorah, the candelabrum. This fire does not consume, it illuminates and enlightens. Rabbi Kutz's flame was that of the menorah. It was not the fire of zealotry, but that of love, which, as King Solomon taught us, many waters cannot extinguish such love. Song of Songs 8:7. His flame was not raging, but soft. He sought not to overwhelm, but to persuade, not to frighten, but to inspire. Rabbi Dr. Leon Kutz possessed the more personal, deliberate, subtle, softer, glowing light of the menorah that will continue to guide us who cherished him so dearly. His fire remains Rabbi Tovia Singer's constant companion. He humbly thanked the Almighty for enabling him to raise and sanctify his holy name with this work in memory of his teacher, Rabbi Dr. Leon Kutz. May the memory of the pious be for a blessing. His deep gratitude to Rabbi Singer, Katz, Shimon and Nancy Kutz and Avi and Dr. Nadine Katz for dedicating this volume, Tovia Singer. So that was his teacher and mentor. Preface. The last thing Tovia Singer states he ever expected to be was a Torah observant Jew. Growing up poor in a broken home with little religious influence, he embraced the Christian gospel at 16, partly through a Calvary Chapel related commune for former street people during the early Jesus movement in Southern California. We were a ragtag group burnt out from the sex, drugs and rock and roll influences of the free love culture, but through faith in a personal Lord and Saviour, hundreds of thousands of us united around the Great Commission and a collective effort to evangelize a lost and dying world before it was too late, before hundreds of millions of believers would be divinely snatched off the planet in rapture, the precursor event to the 7-year Great Tribulation period in which the world would be ruled and ultimately tyrannized by the Antichrist. He became a member and eventually a minister of the International Church of the Foursquare Gospel, a rapidly growing Pentecostal charismatic denomination very similar to the Assemblies of God. He was a close disciple of such leaders as Roy Hicks Jr. and Dr. Jack Hayford, while his evangelical professors had taught him that the gospel must be proclaimed to all the world. They placed a premium on reaching Jewish people. This book will explain why. His passion for winning Jewish souls led him to living 4 years in Israel, first as a student of Hebrew and later as an English teacher, using his professional skills as a cover for his missionary activities. Over time, his studies of Hebrew caused fractures in his faith. As he examined missionary-approved texts in Hebrew to share them with spiritually illiterate Israelis, he noted that something seemed off. The English translations he knew so well appeared either mistranslated or taken out of context when compared with the Hebrew original. How could this be? Wasn't the Bible, the Old and New Testaments, a seamless, divinely inspired work? Wasn't Jesus the fulfillment of some 300 Old Testament prophecies by which we could surely identify the promised Redeemer? Hadn't the Jews rejected their own Messiah and for 2,000 years paid the price of exile for rejecting him? He was less and less sure. The few friends he spoke to of his doubts diagnosed he was under the influence of demons, but having done graduate studies in linguistics, he couldn't argue with the Hebrew text. They didn't support the missionary interpretations. Questions tugged at him. Was Christianity true because he believed it, or did he believe it because it was true? Grasping to get back on more solid footing, he left Israel to take up a position in a large Californian church. Two years later, he left the ministry. There was no gracious way to leave. He was hurting and he hurt a lot of people. For 8 years, he wandered and wandered, spiritually and geographically, including a 2.5-year stint as an English teacher in Saudi Arabia. Having dabbled with a veritable stew of spiritual alternatives, he had an intuitive sense that Judaism was unique among the world's faith systems, but he wasn't quite sure why. Curiously, he discovered an article by Rabbi Tovia Singer. So this is not Rabbi Tovia Singer actually writing this preface. It's this guy here, Gabriel ben Avraham, formerly Reverend Mark W. Sanders. He must have converted to this Jewish faith. Having dabbled with a veritable stew of spiritual alternatives, he had an intuitive sense that Judaism was unique among the world's faith systems, but he wasn't quite sure why. Curiously, he discovered an article by Rabbi Tovia Singer which challenged him to objectively examine the textual evidence for the resurrection of Jesus. Jesus' resurrection is the most cardinal doctrine in the New Testament. Without it, all else unravels. Rabbi Singer recommended an approach of self-study. He took it and he let go of Jesus. Now that he was free to examine Judaism with a clearer eye and freer heart, he entered the Jewish world through a liberal Jewish movement, which actually reminded him of liberal Protestantism. But within a couple of years, he concluded that if Judaism was a house, he was living on the porch. His experience, while warm and culturally stimulating, was spiritually thin. Around this time, a former Messianic rabbi told him that Rabbi Tovia Singer was lecturing in his area. He attended and left duly challenged to help other Jews influenced by missionaries. He went through another conversion, a more rigorous and demanding Orthodox process, and on the 23rd of Kislev 5760, 2 days before Chanukah in December 1999, he emerged from the waters of the Los Angeles mikveh with a new name, Gabriel ben Avraham. Now, 14 years later, he can affirm that it's been a whole new multifaceted life, as rewarding as it's been challenging. He's crossed paths with Rabbi Singer a number of times since. He's been a guest on his podcast, and he was a guest on his when he was on New York radio. They spent challenging days together as part of a support mission to Gush Katif in the summer of 2005. They've shared in lectures together, and like many former evangelical Christians who have embraced Torah observance, he's attentively absorbed his lectures and study materials. For more than a quarter of a century, Rabbi Singer has travelled the world helping Jews discover the richness and beauty hidden in their own spiritual heritage. Many of them had taken a detour into missionary Christianity and the Messianic movement in a quest for spiritual satisfaction. The book you hold now, or the book you're being read now, contains compelling biblical truths which brought them out of the church and back home to the faith of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, David, Solomon, the Hebrew prophets, and millions of anonymous Jews who dared cling to the Torah despite all efforts to convert them anyway. If it hadn't been for these brave and faithful souls, those Jews who believe in Jesus today wouldn't even know they are Jewish. Ironically, missionaries will study this book in an effort to sharpen their counter-arguments. Sincere students of the Bible will pore through it to understand why Jews have said no to the overtures of evangelicals for centuries, but earnest seekers will employ this book to connect with the unbroken chain of Torah learning and living. While an easy book to read, this is a hard book to master. It chiropractically adjusts misaligned beliefs. That's not comfortable, but it's necessary as we proceed into these days our sages regard as ikvesha de Meshicha, the footsteps of Messiah. As Rabbi Singer indicates in these pages, the ultimate redemption and revelation of the Jewish people as the historical torchbearers of the Almighty is near. May this book serve as a homing beacon for many who, like he did, this Gabriel, former Reverend Mark W. Sanders, like he did, wondered and wandered yet never stopped looking for the path. Beraka, with blessing. Gabriel Aryeh bin Avraham, formerly Reverend Mark W. Sanders. Again, here's a little notice here. Invite Rabbi Tovia Singer to your community and experiences eye-opening lectures. Schedule a program, etc. And they're talking about financial support. Donate them. Author's introduction. The vast in-depth study of both Jewish and Christian scriptures explored in this multi-volume book is not typical of Jewish literature. Rather, this work was written in response to the growing and unyielding effort of numerous fundamentalist Christian organizations which aggressively target Jews for conversion. All too often, this author's brethren, or this author, feel battered and helpless when confronted by missionaries and critics of their faith. Let's Get Biblical. Why doesn't Judaism accept the Christian Messiah? Therefore delves into the fundamental reasons why Judaism does not accept the Christian Messiah. The pages that follow illustrate why the core teachings and doctrines of the Church are spiritually incompatible with the cornerstone principles expressed by the prophets of Israel and are opposed by the most cherished tenets conveyed in the Jewish scriptures. Moreover, this book demonstrates how the Church systematically and deliberately altered the Jewish scriptures in order to persuade potential converts that Jesus is the promised Jewish Messiah. To accomplish this feat, Christian translators manipulated, misquoted, mistranslated, and even fabricated verses in the Hebrew scriptures so that these texts appear to be speaking about Jesus. Consequently, Jewish people who are most vulnerable to Jewish evangelism are those who know least about the faith they have been asked to abandon. The distinctiveness of Let's Get Biblical, Why Doesn't Judaism Accept the Christian Messiah, is in its eye-opening articles and probing expository notes which explore and illuminate this thought-provoking subject. Tragically, over the past 2 millennia, the Church's faithful have been completely oblivious to this Bible tampering because virtually no Christian can read or understand the Hebrew scriptures in its original language. Since time immemorial, earnest parishioners blindly and utterly depended upon man-made Christian translations of the Old Testament in order to understand the Word of God. Understandably, churchgoers are deeply puzzled by the Jewish rejection of their religion's claims. They wonder aloud why Jewish people, who are reared since childhood in the Holy Tongue and are the bearers and protectors of the sacred oracles of God, do not accept Jesus as their Messiah. How can such an extraordinary people dismiss such an extraordinary claim? Are they just plain stubborn? The central goal of this work is to thoroughly answer these nagging age-old questions. Finally, this book was written in a manner that uses Christianity as a foil to reflect back the truth and beauty of the Jewish faith. Included in this volume, this is volume 1, are the extensive passages, references and charts cited in the 24-part Let's Get Biblical audio series available online at outreachjudaism.org. Tovia Singer. Okay, here he is saying virtually no Christian can read or understand the Hebrew scriptures in its original language. Okay, so he is talking about the original ancient, very old Hebrew. not the modern Israeli Hebrew, or the Ketav or Tav Ivri or Avri, or even the Tav Ketav Hotep, which supposedly Moses learnt from either his grandfather or his father while in Egypt. Isn't that what he's hinting at? Okay. It's been verified that today's Hebrew is the modern Israeli Hebrew. It's admitted by many Jews. It's a modern vernacular, or modern version of that ancient Hebrew. If the ancient Hebrew, the Ketav Avri or Ivri, is a long dead language and nobody speaks it, how can you revive those old manuscripts and translate that long dead language? Only through a modern vernacular, the root words of the modern vernacular. Have they done that? Okay, here's the contents page. Part 1, Evangelizing the Jews. Part 2, How do missionaries paint Jesus into the Jewish scriptures? Part 3, Sin and Atonement. Part 4, Who is a suffering servant? Part 5, the Trinity in Isaiah 9:5-6, and so forth. And his Index of Scripture References, page 387. A note to the reader. In addition to the immense body of information which thoroughly explores why Judaism does not accept the Christian Messiah, this book contains fascinating reference material supporting the 24-part Let's Get Biblical audio series. This supplemental material has been vastly expanded since its last publication and includes easy to understand charts and informative illustrations, which are indispensable aids to a complete understanding of the lecture topics. Using this material while listening to the lectures will immeasurably enrich your reading experience. There is no charge for these lectures. You may download the entire lecture series for free. Go to www.outreachjudaism.org, click on Let's Get Biblical, and you will see the lecture titles that correspond to the topics discussed in this book. We could also bring you the video lectures from his show, the Tanakh Talk. Long before you have finished listening to the lectures and reading both volumes of this work, you will grasp the importance of having intimate knowledge of the Jewish scriptures, without which even the Christian Bible cannot be understood. Tovia Singer. The lecture, here's a footnote here, indication. The lecture, What Are We Doing Wrong? What Are They Doing Right? Corresponds to Volume 1, Part 1, Evangelizing the Jews. Part 1, Evangelizing the Jews. And here's some sort of card. Messianic Soul Winner's Card. The fruit of the righteous is a tree of life, and he that wins soul is wise. Proverbs 11:30. A. Become as a Jew to the Jews. 1 Corinthians 9:20. Do say 1. Messiah Yeshua, Messiah Jesus the Messiah. 2. Messianic Jew, completed Jew, fulfilled Jew. 3. A Bible believer. 4. Come to a meeting of Bible believers. 5. Second part of Bible, New Covenant. 6. Tree execution sake. Don't say 1. Jesus Christ. 2. Convert. 3. A Christian, come to church. 5. New Testament or cross. Explanation. 1. The term Christ does not have any Jewish connotation to the average Jew. 2. Convert means to take away. Judaism, to become a Goy, a Gentile. Messianic Jew means to build up upon or add to his Jewish heritage by gaining the atonement, gaining the Messiah, and gaining a more personal relationship with God. He does not have to give up his wonderful biblical Jewish heritage. Emphasize what he gains. 3. All non-Jews are considered Christians, even Hitler. 4. The term church is too Gentile to be desirable to a Jewish person. 5. New Testament is considered a non-Jewish book. Don't emphasize its name. Use it. 6. The cross has been a symbol of Jewish persecution for centuries. Flip it over or something. Communication cards used to train missionaries to convert Jews. Okay, that's what that is. And were they Messianic movement or Messianic Jews or something? Or just the evangelists of the Christian church trying to do that? Though I am free and belong to no man, I make myself a slave to everyone to win as many as possible. To the Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those under the law I became like one under the law, though I myself am not under the law, so as to win those under the law. To those not having the law I became like one not having the law, although I am not free from God's law, but am under Christ's law, so as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak to win the weak. I have become all things to all men, so that by all possible means I might save some. 1 Corinthians 9:19-22. The Reformers offer it's got some information here on that. And then next to it, some advice on Jews. These must be photocopies of, or copies of, things written by Martin Luther in 1543. He was a Roman Catholic, supposed father of the Reformation. The Protestant Reformation. What did famed Christians say about the Jews? These are all the church fathers. Saint Justin Martyr, Christian apologist. Saint Melito, Bishop of Sardis. Constantine the Great, first Christian Roman emperor who convened the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE. Saint Gregory of Nyssa. Saint John Chrysostom. Okay, Saint Augustine, Martin Luther, German founder of the Protestant Reformation, 1483 to 1546. Charles A. Spurgeon, British particular Baptist preacher, revered by Christians of different denominations, among whom he is still known as the Prince of Preachers, 1834 to 1892. Okay, there they are. These evangelists, probably in Israel, wearing Jews for Jesus t-shirt. No Sunday services take place in this church. This congregation meets only on Friday evenings and Saturday mornings. You will never see a cross or altar. Evangelical Christian churches use traditional Jewish symbols to entice vulnerable Jews. Instead, there is an Aron Kodesh, Holy Ark, with a Star of David adorning its velvet cover, and a Bema, stage for prayer services in the centre of the sanctuary. The majority of the men who worship here wear kippot and their tzitzit hang down the sides of their pants. They like what do you call it? Tassels or something. Okay, here's some more information here. New Testament in Hebrew and Yiddish. A training manual on how to share the Messiah. The Messianic Jewish Movement International. An effort to evangelize the elderly missionaries distribute the Yiddish Hebrew New Testament. A translation of the first chapter of the book of John appears above in Yiddish left and Hebrew right. To the Jewish community, the word missionary is a negative charged word with a multitude of misconceptions attached to it. It typically brings to mind people who stand on street corners, annoyingly and ubiquitously distributing literature, seeking to persuade individuals to believe in Jesus. What comes to mind is a well-organized, highly centralized, clearly identifiable missionary organization with zealous members, large mailing lists, motivated secretaries, and a building to which we can point and say, you see that place on 31st Street? Or 31st Street, between Lexington and Park Avenue? That's the New York headquarters of Jews for Jesus. They are the missionaries. This is merely one of a variety of misconceptions we have about the inner work of Jewish evangelism. Okay, who are these missionaries? While lecturing at a large university in Ohio, Rabbi Tovia Singer discussed his work with the campus dean. He assured him that Jewish evangelism ceased at his university. Years earlier, he recalled, missionaries were frequently on the campus, distributing pamphlets that misused traditional Jewish symbols for the purpose of evangelizing. But we don't have that here anymore, he insisted. Tell me then, Rabbi Tovia Singer asked, are there any fundamentalist born-again Christians on campus? What? Are you kidding? This is the Midwest. We're packed with them, he quickly snapped. He informed him that, in fact, he had a serious missionary problem on his campus because, with rare exceptions, fundamentalist born-again Christians are dedicated to bringing every Jew to the cross. There is a tendency in the Jewish community to view the Christian world as a monolithic group of Gentiles who all essentially believe the same thing. This is a serious mistake. Goes on about a serious missionary problem exists on campus with evangelical fundamental Christians. Sorting out the complex Christian world, Roman Catholics and liberal Protestants are generally not interested in Jewish evangelism. Gentile parishioners rather than Hebrew Christians are most effective in evangelizing the Jew, or the Jews. We are limiting our narratives so you can have a look at the content in this particular volume at great length, at your own leisure, in your own time. Part 2. How do missionaries paint Jesus into the Jewish scriptures? A verse quoted out of context. Matthew 2:13-15. And when they were departed, behold, the angel of the Lord appeareth to Joseph in a dream, saying, Arise and take the young child and his mother, and flee into Egypt, and be thou there until I bring thee word, for Herod will seek the young child to destroy him. When he arose, he took the young child and his mother by night, and departed into Egypt, and was there until the death of Herod, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken of the Lord by the prophet, saying, Out of Egypt I have called my son. And what's taken out of concept is Hosea 11:1. When Israel was a child, then I loved him and called my son out of Egypt. A person who is really seeking to know the truth about God is not going to search the Bible hoping to find a text that he can construe as fitting what he already believes. He wants to know what the Tanakh itself says, yet this is not the path that the writers of the New Testament followed. Instead, without exception, every verse missionaries use as a proof text to bolster their claim that Jesus is the Messiah is unsupported by the Jewish scriptures and quoted completely out of context. For example, the author of the book of Matthew claims that the last phrase of Hosea 11:1 that we've already read out demonstrates that Jesus' childhood escape into Egypt was foretold in the Jewish scriptures. This verse, cited by the New Testament author, however, was recklessly torn out of its original context. Read pages 32 to 329 for an extensive study of Matthew's nativity narrative. The children of Israel are specifically identified as God's son in Hosea 11:1, not Jesus, as Matthew would have us believe. Moreover, Hosea recalled the past exodus of the Jewish people from Egypt in this passage, not a future child Messiah fleeing into Egypt. Matthew ripped this phrase out of context for one purpose. He sought to persuade his readers that the prophet Hosea made a fantastic prediction about Jesus. Compare Hosea 11:1 and Matthew 1:15 for yourself. Missionaries cite Zechariah 13:6 in order to prove that one who was wounded in his hands was foretold by the Hebrew prophet. See below. Oddly, this passage is described as a false prophet. Is describing a false prophet who will publicly confess his iniquity, not a crucified Messiah. In essence, to be correct about the interpretation of a verse in the Bible, you must be certain that the explanation of a text agrees with the context and is consistent with the rest of the Tanakh. And there's Zechariah 13:1-6 there. And here it is in the Hebrew. And he's going on about Christian Bibles mistranslate the Hebrew word ka'ari, which means like a lion not pierced. In the King James, in the original Hebrew, okay, is that the original Hebrew or modern Israeli Hebrew? Jewish translation, okay, and so forth. Why in Isaiah 31:13 does the King James Version correctly translate the exact word as a lion? King James Version, Isaiah 38:13. I reckon till morning that as a lion, so will he break all my bones. From day even to night wilt thou make an end of me. Hebrew Isaiah 38:13. It's comparison, and it's whatever this is in Hebrew is correctly translated in the King James Version in English, even though it's in Shakespeare speak. Matthew 2:23, and he came and dwelt in a city called Nazareth, that it might be fulfilled which was spoken by the prophet, he shall be called a Nazarene. Contrary to Matthew's claim, there is no prophecy anywhere in the Jewish scriptures which suggests that the Messiah will reside in Nazareth. In fact, the city of Nazareth is never mentioned in the Hebrew Bible. It is mentioned in the original ancient, very old Galilean Aramaic scriptures, manuscriptures translated by Victor N. Alexander, a native-born Aramaic-speaking Mesopotamian with 15 years experience translating those hidden and preserved for over 2,000 years. Scriptures from the original Apostolic Church of the East. We will look at that particular scripture in the Aramaic New Testament, translated by Victor Alexander, Matthew 2:23. Because there's an important footnote in regard to that. Matthew 2:23. It's page 11 of the Aramaic New Testament, or Disciples' New Testament, translated by Victor N. Alexander. And it reads, and he came and lived in the town called Nazareth, so that what the prophets had said came to be fulfilled, that victorious he shall be called. Footnote 223. In Aramaic, pronounced Nusrat, meaning the victorious, or the town of Nazareth, for he would be victorious over the devil and over sin. He would be victorious and he would complete his mission, what he was destined to be, coming as God incarnate in the flesh, to live and then be killed, sacrificed according to Scripture. So we're going to move along. Matthew claims Jesus' virgin birth was foretold in the book of Isaiah, Matthew 1:20-23. We'll have a look at that. Quick look at that. Matthew 1:20-23. Okay, it goes through the genealogy, the books of the birth of Joshua the Messiah, or Esau the Messiah, Jesus the Christ, the son of David, the son of Abraham. We're going to go down to 23. And all this took place then so that everything the Lord had said through the prophet may be fulfilled, that, behold, the virgin shall conceive and give birth to the son, and they will call his name Emmanuel, which means Allah, or God in the Aramaic. Galilean Aramaic is with us. Footnotes 1:16.2. Literal Aramaic title, Mashiach, Messiah. Common spelling in English, or Christ. 125.1. Literal Aramaic idiom, Heir, H-E-I-R, the eldest son, the benefactor. 125.2 in B. Take note, it's pronounced Isho. Usually it's spelled Y-S-H-O in the Galilean Aramaic. That he's put Joshua because Western speakers find it hard to say the name Esau or Esau. So he refers to him as Joshua. There is a good reason why the virgin birth of Jesus is not mentioned in any of the earliest writings of the New Testament. The notion that Jesus was miraculously conceived was a later Christian invention. Would that be Roman Catholic? Paul, whose epistles are the oldest and most extensive writings in the Christian canon, did not believe that Jesus was born of a virgin. Accordingly, he never mentioned his birth. Moreover, Paul appears to express negative view of developing virgin birth stories and their various genealogies and consider them fanciful and harmful to faith. He urges his followers not to occupy themselves with myths and endless genealogies which promote speculation. 1 Timothy 1:4. The author of the book of Mark, the oldest and least embellished gospel, was also unaware of Jesus' virgin birth and begins by introducing us to Jesus as an adult at his baptism. Let's have a look at that 123 again. Matthew 1:23. Okay. 22. All this took place so that everything the Lord had said, that's Master God, Maria Allah, had said through the prophet, possibly the prophet Isaiah, may be fulfilled, that, behold, the virgin will conceive and give birth to the son, and they will call his name Emmanuel, which means Allah, or God is with us. So there it is in the ancient Aramaic, Galilean Aramaic New Testament, translated by Victor and Alexander. And there's a little note at the back here of it. Joshua Mashiach, Jesus the Christ, spoke in the Galilean dialect of Asherit, the language spoken at Nineveh at the time of Jonah the prophet, commonly known as ancient Aramaic. This is the language in which the disciples and the apostles preached the gospel and the scribes recorded the scriptures. The New Testament has been preserved in the sacred scribal language since the apostolic age. The whole Bible was originated in this language. This translation by Victor N. Alexander is made from the original Aramaic text directly into English, bypassing the errors of the Greek original, the Latin Vulgate, and all the other Western translations made from them. This is an effort to rekindle the apostolic faith in the name of Yahushua Mashiach, or Jesus the Messiah, throughout the world. Victor Alexander, translator. Also, Andrew Gabriel Roth, Messianic Jew, at the AramaicsScriptures.com, has done the same thing, but he has translated from the original Eastern Syriac Peshitta, bypassing the Greek original, the Latin Vulgate, and all the other Western translations made from it, right? From the same Apostolic Church of the East, but he tends to mix Syriac with Hebrew, being a Messianic Jew. And Tovia Singer here goes on to say the Gospel of Matthew mistranslated Isaiah 7:14, the book of Matthew 80 to 85 CE, written about 15 years after the book of Mark, is one of two Gospels which claim that Jesus was miraculously conceived without a human father. To support this assertion, the first Gospel famously misquoted Isaiah 7:14 to read, "Behold, a virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Emmanuel," which means God is with us. 1:23, Matthew 1:23. Matthew quite dramatically and very deliberately mistranslated the original Hebrew text of Isaiah 7:14. What compelled the author of the book of Matthew to change the original words of Isaiah? He sought to prove that Isaiah predicted that Jesus would be conceived miraculously and was therefore quite literally the Son of God, and so forth. We shall verify that possibly in the second part of this video. Okay, the Septuagint therefore mistranslated Proverbs 30:19. The Septuagint was a Alexandrian Greek new translation or new version, right? New Bible version, where supposedly all the other Bibles stem from. Okay, what does it say here? The Septuagint therefore mistranslates Proverbs 30:19, and the way of man in his youth, etc. The Septuagint, the Methodist Christian redactors employed to revise this Greek translation of Tanakh, okay, which is done in Alexandria, Egypt, via the Ptolemies, possibly Ptolemy I or Ptolemy II, and so forth. Matthew ripped Isaiah 7:14 out of context, because this is what Matthew 1:23 apparently says in your English Bibles, and this is what it says in Isaiah. Very different. Or is it? The significance of the name Emmanuel. Would a natural conception be called a sign? Missionaries defend Matthew by citing the Septuagint. Christian apologists frequently defend Matthew's translation of the Hebrew word as virgin by citing the Septuagint version of Isaiah. They argue that the Septuagint, a Greek translation of the Hebrew scriptures rendered by Jewish scholars approximately 2,000 years ago, employed the Greek word for virgin, Parthenos, in Isaiah 7:14. They concluded therefore that the original text must have been understood to mean virgin, and Matthew, who was writing in Greek about the virgin birth of Jesus, was quoting the passage from the Septuagint rather than the Hebrew text. This is one of those explanations that sounds plausible until you dig it a bit and think a bit more. It is an argument that is erroneous and misleading. The original Septuagint was a Greek translation of only the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, nothing else. Therefore, the book of Isaiah was not even part of the Septuagint translated by learned Jews thousands of years ago, as the missionaries routinely claim. Rather, this book of Tanakh is a part of the prophets, the second section of Jewish scriptures, and was forged by the church many centuries later. It is universally accepted by all scholars, both Jewish and Christian, that the original Septuagint or Proto-Septuagint was a translation only of the 5 books of Moses. The letter of Aristeas, the earliest attestation to the Septuagint, dating back to the 2nd century BCE, affirms that the Septuagint was a translation by Jews only of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. The 1st century Roman historian, Josephus Flavius, they reckon he was a Roman, a Jew who converted, called himself a Roman, hence the name Josephus Flavius of the Flavius family. Similarly states that under Ptolemy Philadelphus, only the law was translated, and the same is stated in the Talmud. You'd have to see page 63 of this for other attestations. He claims here, Rabbi Tovia Singer, the author of the book of Matthew clearly went to great lengths to rewrite Isaiah 7:14, so this passage would appear to be foretelling Jesus' virgin birth. Although these methods were crude, they were deliberate and thought out. Following the destruction of the Second Temple and the annihilation of Jerusalem's Jewish life by the Roman legions of Titus and Vespasian in the year 70 CE, the Church adopted the myth of the virgin birth, which was enormously popular in the pagan world. It was a highly successful attempt to appeal to the new target audience of Gentiles, or non-Jews, or foreigners. These largely illiterate yet spiritually hungry people were abandoning paganism and Gnosticism, in which they had been reared since childhood. With few exceptions, these religions were filled with legends of various deities who were born to virgin mothers. By the 90s, the belief in Jesus' miraculous conception was well established and widespread throughout the Roman Empire and beyond. It had emerged as full-blown Christian orthodoxy. By the 2nd century, those who questioned Jesus' virgin birth were regarded as heretics. Bear in mind that traditional Jewish chronology chronologies since the beginning of the Jewish calendar, almost 6,000 years ago, have always been based on absolute and highly accurate astronomical phenomena. The movement of the moon around the earth, months, and that of the earth around the sun, years. A combination of an unbroken tradition of the Bible and a precise astronomical time-based system gives traditional Jewish chronology a high degree of accuracy, especially when it comes to the major events of Jewish history. So what that's saying there is in relation to what we have already done in previous videos, in regards to the world's lastchance.org, saying that the original calendar was the God-created calendar, or the Hebrew calendar, based on the lunar, solar, sun and moon, astronomical, etc. So their days were very different, like the evening and the morning was the first day, or a day, etc. And many Christians say, well, yeah, God created all in 6 days and rested on the 7th, whereas in the original Aramaic, Assyrian Aramaic, Brita, Ketav Asheret, it has a word called Yuma, Y-U-M-A, which means immeasurable period, because no man was created, so no one knows when did God start, when did he end, right? Immeasurable period, eon, era, age, day with a capital D, hinting at the day was in accordance with the astronomical, the lunar, solar revolution, etc., or evolutions. So it wasn't literally a 6-day event. It could have been over a period of a millennium or 1,000 years or more, because remember there's the verse that says to God a day is like 1,000 years. There may be another one where it says a week is like 1,000 years. So he takes his time. He's a creator after all, he's no one around. He's got nothing to rush, no reason to rush, right? So he takes his time, however long it took, i.e. a measurable period. Also quoted years earlier, we realise this, by a Christian evangelist, author. He said the same thing. A measurable period, unfathomable period, because there's no man created, no human being was on the earth to actually write down or make note, take note, whatever, or come out and say through orally, oral tradition, that God created everything in one day, 6 days, and then rested on the 7th. Different kind of mindset, different Eastern understanding and mindset, putting that across to the Western mindset, who reading something translated into English believe it quicker than instant noodles, right? They believe because it's in black and white and that's what it says, that's what it literally means. But they don't realise those are copies of copies of copies of copies of copies of a copy, right? And being translated by a certain church, possibly corrupted throughout the ages by their scribes, right? The affiliates or the devotees or adherents of their particular church throughout the centuries, right? All said to be church fathers, and then put out in biblical format, into modern English, in biblical format by their affiliates or associates or those tied to them, the American Bible Society, Bible committees, etc., who keep calling, like for 1966, 1976, etc., that we need a new modern translation, etc., etc. So they gather, they look at it all, they go through 3 revisions of everything, and then out comes this modern translation, right? Another modern translation, like all the other translations, put out into the world by the adherents, the American Bible Society or Bible societies, etc. The assertion of the controversial Greek historian Herodotus, who has been called the father of history by Cicero and the father of lies by the historian philosopher Xenophon, student of Socrates, and data from records of ancient Rome, Greece, Mesopotamia and Egypt, including chronicles of major events such as battles between empires, were combined with archaeological finds and major astronomical phenomena such as solar eclipses and dates, were then calculated by applying various scientific dating methods. There's a reference here. Catholic Encyclopedia, Mithraism, etc. Sol, the sun, and the art and religions of Rome, and so forth. And he asked, did the word virgin appear in the original Septuagint? Here's all the Christian translations.